Welcome to Carter's Retro Reviews. You know, there are some things about me that you guys don't know, and for the most part, that's okay. Yeah, there are some things that you don't know, and maybe that's for the better, but then there's other things that, you don't know, and I'm okay with you guys knowing. Such as, I used to be a stripper in a past life. Look, I know it's hard to believe, but I've even got video footage I managed to track down. Here it is.
If you've never seen the movie, it was about Brendan Leaney's fiancée who were killed by some thugs, and then a year later to the day, this crow shows up and taps on the headstone. Then Brendan Lee wakes up and he's all like, "God damn, that was some good sleep. What day is it?" Okay, I don't know why he sounds black. But then he seeks vengeance on the people who did him wrong a year ago. Then he can see telepathically what the crow sees and uses the crow to find the thugs and, okay, it makes more sense in the movie. There's more to it, but I don't want to spoil it for you. Now, if the story in this game was that clear, that would be a great start to the game. The Crow was developed by Grey Matter Studios Incorporated and published by Acclaim. This review was requested by the guys at the Sega Saturn UK forums and was touted as one game I absolutely must play. And not because it's so amazingly wonderful it'll make me forget all other games exist. But you know what? It didn't do that. To put things into perspective first, you'll open up the case to pull out the CD, and the artwork on the inside of the case tells me Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Iron and Blood is coming to the Saturn, which is also published by Acclaim, but I found out it was cancelled. It came out on the PS1 and was completely panned, so it's probably a good thing it never reached the Saturn. This game is such a missed opportunity because it could have been an awesome beat-em-up, but a few key problems plague this game. Now, before we break this down, I want to say that I found this game not as bad as people make it out to be. It would make a very easy review to sit here and say how terrible this game obviously is, but then it'd be just another video on the game. I'm going to tell you why I didn't hate this game as intensely as you all did. The menu presentation was actually pretty damn cool. A sign of a good game before I've seen a single frame, which immediately sours the second you start playing. I see I'm Brendan Lee and the outlay is sparse, but I think on presentation alone, it's not bad. In-game presentation would be far better if the life bars were a bit more indicative of what the hell is going on. As it looks like I have 2 health bars in the same bar, one for the head and one for the body or something. Or maybe I have 2 health bars for the 1 life. I was never ever 100% sure on that. Graphics in the game aren't that bad. They're certainly not great, but the only glaring problem, and it really hurts the gameplay, is the collision detection. It's so bad, you throw a punch and if you're too far or too close, it'll miss, and if you're not directly in front, you'll also miss. The game is absolutely punishing because of it. The backgrounds are dark, but I get it. It's the atmosphere you're going for. It's detailed in parts where there's light, but then there's these whole bits that look like browns, greys and blacks, all just mashed together during finger painting that was done by some kid. Animation can be pretty good some of the time, like the punches and throwing items, but walking seems to be really stilted. One thing I will give it points for is atmosphere. If you really hate everything else about this game, the atmosphere feels tense. Like I'm about to go and kick some ass with this looming feeling of something greater than I, which I'm about to face head on, which the movie encapsulated very well. Music is annoyingly repetitive, to the point where I just wanted to stab myself in the fucking ear with a pencil. But the sound effects are quite good and in time, which strangely counts for something. Not much of something, but still something all the same. Gameplay is such a big one to discuss. The gameplay itself is so disappointing in what it is, which is supposed to be this 3D brawler, and you have to understand that I'm not against the genre, but in fact, I love beat-em-ups. It's just that it's hampered by a few big problems. The obvious one is controls. You know that if the controls aren't clear and concise, I have a fucking hissy. It does the same thing that Crusader No Remorse did in the way that up is your movement forward and your left or right is to spin clockwise or counterclockwise. I didn't like it in Crusader No Remorse, and yes, okay, I know you can change it, but obviously if it's the default, they thought it was the best control scheme for the game when it feels gimpy to play. On top of that, The controls have a delay on them. In fact, I'm not even sure it's the controls that are holding me back. It's how fast the game wants to process the mashing of buttons. Like, the game wants you to consider each punch and kick instead of throwing a mash of buttons and occasionally moving out of the way if you're a defensive player like you would in a typical brawler. But that brings me to the next problem, and that is, the fighting is super boring. I walk up to one guy or a group of guys and I don't have the tools available to defeat them without taking, at the very least, a few punches myself. Which would be fine, except the game doesn't really give me any moves to avoid, or a super punch, or something to make approaching a group of guys interesting, or even doable without taking health. And yes, in a one-on-one fight, or even a two-on-one fight, I can avoid nearly every punch, because, as the player, that's the skill I'm supposed to have. But it feels like I'm supposed to approach the group in the way that the new Batman games do on occasion, by attacking one specific guy in the team, or it doesn't invoke the attention of other members to come over and beat the living shit out of me. And I couldn't figure out how to do that most of the time. The weapons you pick up do help. Not tremendously, but enough to give you an advantage in any fight that includes more than one enemy. Now, I've heard through the grapevine that some people are not a fan of Guardian Heroes, and while you've got the right to be wrong in your opinion, play this game and tell me how dreadful you think Guardian Heroes is. I always find it strange that people can be totally critical of games or movies held in high esteem when they've never seen how bad it can really get, to put things into perspective. Yes, I get, we all choose what we want to watch and play, but you can't really weigh in if you haven't seen how bad it can get, and while this game is undoubtedly bad, it only needed one or two improvements and you have a dark, intense beat 'em up on your hands. Why I mention Guardian Heroes is because it too is a beat 'em up, which demonstrates how to have a more interesting gameplay within the beat 'em up genre. What I do appreciate is the crow symbol showing me where I need to head. Some games don't give you any indication on where you're supposed to be heading, and depending on the atmosphere can either be interesting to roam around and explore, or just piss you off. Not that it was particularly hard in the first place on where to head, but that brings me to the next problem, and that is when you move between scenes, there's this slight delay, which is not a problem in of itself. But sometimes because of the camera angle, you might actually be running into a wall, and then you wait for the scene to change, but nothing's happening. You can feel like a right douchebag just sitting there when in fact, he's standing there waiting for you. Replay value is piss poor. You can argue any other aspect of this game all day long, but it's a single player with static enemies. Even if you do have a soft spot for this game, you certainly won't be getting that much out of it that you'll be playing it again and again. Would I recommend this game? Well, no, of course not. But I still maintain that it wouldn't take much to turn this game into something enjoyable and worthwhile. To those of you who are expecting me to shower this game with fireballs of hate, I'm sorry for disappointing you. It's not that bad. I mean, it's also not very good either, but in a strange turn of events, I had more fun with this game than I did with others held in better esteem.
Hey, clown face.